and welcome to The Wisdom of Trees, a virtual presentation of the exhibit currently on display at the Tulepehaking Nature Center. I am Kelly Ripkema, and I direct this nature center that features the beautiful nature and history of the Abbott marshlands. With this exhibit, artists Mary Leck and Patricia Bender treat you to two different ways of seeing trees. One influenced by Mary Leck's work as a botanist and professor, while the other is influenced by Patricia Bender's work as a performing artist and photographer experimenting with different darkroom techniques. Of course, we hope you will visit this exhibit in person once we're open again, but in the meantime, we wanted to share with you the wonderful artistry of the exhibit through the words of the artists themselves. We hope you enjoy The Wisdom of Trees.
Hi, Mary and Patricia. Thanks for being here with us today. My name is Pat Coleman, and I'd like to ask you a few questions, starting with, how did this exhibit come to be?
Do you want to start? I think we mutually admired each other's work. And Patricia had some pictures in some of the marsh shows.
That's right.
And one thing led to another, and here we are. I mean, we don't actually remember when we decided to have a tree show, but anyway, here we are. And it's been a wonderful thing working with Patricia because she just brings a whole different set of ideas to this. But I would like to say one thing, however, that in thinking about it, artists and scientists use the same two techniques, the same two skills, experimentation and observation.
Yeah.
And I think we both do that.
Definitely.
So, anyway.
Yeah, and I remember distinctly the first time I saw Mary's work and was just blown away by her ability to capture the beauty of nature, no matter what it is, too. I mean, she can take what people would normally just walk right by and never even notice and turn it into the most incredibly beautiful, abstract expression of the natural world. And so to meet her, and then to meet her and find out that she's also a font of knowledge about everything, I was thrilled to work with her. Even though I said I don't really have a scientific understanding of trees and nature, I just love nature. It was wonderful to be with her and learn so many interesting things about the natural world and especially the plant world.
Yeah, and one thing with Patricia, I mean, she uses so many different techniques. I mean, I just am pretty straightforward in the kinds of things I do to produce the pictures that I have. But she does all these things in the dark room, and it just is a whole level of activity that I can't really identify with anymore.
And I think in all honesty too, this took forever to come about because we started talking about it, and I think for the longest time we just kind of used it as an excuse to have lunch together. And then as the date got closer, then we got more and more serious.
Once we got a date on the calendar for the nature center, so we better do something. But it allowed me to look through a lot of pictures that I had taken for a long time ago, and then to take some new pictures. I have one picture here that's of a lightning strike on a tree, and that was a fairly recent thing. But you just sort of are more aware of the trees around you, and if you have your camera, you have to have your camera.
And what's been good about this show for me has been I was actually working on a large tree project. And was basically I was asking people to identify their favorite tree for me, and then I was going and photographing their favorite tree and then finding out the story behind why that tree spoke to them, because it seemed to me, and I think we've even discussed this before, that everybody has a tree that they love, an actual tree that they just love, And I was doing that and had stopped because of personal reasons, and this has inspired me to get back to it, so that's also been a positive of the show for me.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's going along. I mean, trying to learn things about a particular species or learning a little bit about evolution and all those kind of things. It's just really been stimulating for me personally to think about all the things that I should have probably talked to students about when I was teaching how a tree grows. But anyway, you can't talk about everything in class.
That's right. Or in a show.
Yeah, or in a show, that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I have been interested in trees for quite some time. I can remember climbing apple trees and pine trees when I was a kid, and then later seeing some really magnificent trees in various places that I've been, like for example, sequoia trees out in California, the El Tule, which is a Mexican cypress tree in Mexico. I've seen kauri trees in New Zealand, and really tall eucalyptus trees in Australia. So I've really seen a lot of really interesting trees. However, it was the sycamore down at Bordentown Beach that really made me think about how trees grow. And it made me more aware of just tree bark in general. So I photographed a particularly lovely sycamore bark, and when I looked at the photograph later, I saw how the bark cracked into patches that peeled, revealing hidden colors and hinting how the tree had accommodated growing. I hadn't been paying attention, and that was part of my whole thing. I've taught about how trees grew, but I really hadn't thought about it in a really important way. When I really started looking, I soon realized that not all trees respond to growth stresses in the same way. That is, in part, what my part of the exhibit explores. The colors, textures, and patterns of tree bark provide ample opportunities for observation and to ask questions about the physical forces involved in the significance of that variability. And I wonder whether someone ever hears the sound of bark cracking. Bark is remarkable in its variation, even on the same tree. This exhibit for me is mostly about tree bark, but a similar exploration can be made of these tree leaves, flowers, etc. And each could benefit from closer inspection. There is ample opportunity to learn from trees and to understand the wisdom. We need to take time to observe and to reflect on what we see, to be receptive to the gifts nature provides.
I was asked to pick my favorite picture from the show, and I selected this one because it illustrates what I love about photography and about trees. This is a photograph that was taken in Somerset, New Jersey, near the canal, and it illustrates my approach to photographing trees, which is to always follow the light, to see where the light is falling. And typically, once you follow the light, you're going to find a beautiful photograph at the end of it. So that's what I did here. You can see the two trees are almost like in conversation, which is, I tend to anthropomorphize trees a lot. To me, they're like living beings that I love. So to me, I saw these guys in conversation, reaching out to each other, and the light was falling on it just perfectly. In addition, it's an image that illustrates how I photograph trees lately, which is using paper in my camera as my negative rather than film emulsion. So I have an 8x10 camera that I load with photographic paper and shoot, and I get a paper negative, and then I contact print, which is putting the papers together and shining light through it, and that makes the texture of the paper a part of the image as well. Another thing that this image illustrates, which is obvious in this show, is my love for small work. All of my images are quite small and intimate. I kind of tend to approach creating images like I would be creating a book. I want it to be something that you can get close to. I have no desire for you to stand back in awe of my work. I want you to come close and feel like you're a part of it. Kind of the same feeling that I feel when I'm photographing trees.
When I was asked what my favorite tree was, it took me quite a long time to think about it. And it turns out when I was a kid, I used to climb white pine trees to the very top, look around, and so somehow or another I really became familiar with white pine trees. And so I have two pictures here which illustrate white pine. Here is the bark of a younger tree, and you can see these really beautiful colors and patterns as the tree enlarges and pieces of bark fall off actually. The next picture is one of an older tree, And that bark on the lower part of the tree is furrowed. And so you get really changes in bark on one tree that really make it much more difficult to identify trees. But it really is a remarkable strategies that these different trees have for accommodating growth.
I was asked what attracts me to trees and what kinds of trees I like to photograph. And I would say top of my list are trees that are all by themselves, solo trees, lone trees I call them in my head. The ones when you look up at a mountain, there'll usually be one tree that kind of dominates the landscape and towers over everybody else. Or in the Midwest where I'm from, the farm trees that were once planted as blocks but have died out, and there'll be one majestic tree in the middle of a beautiful farm field standing alone. So I'm always attracted to those guys. They call out to me to be documented. And this is an example of a tree from a farm field in Michigan where I'm from. And another thing that I really love to photograph of trees are the canopies of trees, because you can look up into the light, shoot into the light, and create these beautiful silhouettes of the leaves dancing in the sunlight. And the tree branches, if you do take the time to look up, are like abstract paintings in the sky. I mean, I don't think a human could replicate the beauty of tree branches. And you don't notice those. Maybe you do in the winter a little bit when the leaves are gone, but when the leaves are on them, they're even more beautiful.
This is a photograph of pitch pine from the New Jersey pine barrens, and it shows the patchy bark, the peeling kind of bark, the big patch peeled off here. But what's interesting here is that these little bits of holes are made by a sapsucker, and the sapsucker comes to the insects that come to the sap, and they also actually eat the sap itself. And an interesting thing about this particular woodpecker is that it's a migratory one. So if the bugs are all impaled and stuck to the sap and there isn't enough sap to catch bugs, then it moves on to the Caribbean or the southern part of the United States. So that's, there's a lot to say about pitch pines in New Jersey, but that's what we showed in this picture. Okay, this is lion's mane. It's a fungus that you can sometimes find on a tree that's damaged. If there's a broken branch or a lightning strike or something like this, you'll find this tooth fungus on it, and sometimes it will actually come on dead and decaying things. So it acts as a saprobe or a decaying fungus. But an interesting thing about this particular, well, there are a number of interesting things about this, is that it has medicinal uses, can be used as food for humans, but it has mycorrhizal attachments. The fungal filaments in the soil are a part of a mycorrhizal association with other trees, or with the tree and other trees. And this is one way for the tree, via the mycorrhizae, to get nutrition. It's also a way for a tree to communicate with other trees. This is Indian pipe. It's a flowering plant that's non-photosynthetic. It's completely white. And so how does it get its food? Turns out that it has mycorrhizal connections with a green plant, maybe a beech tree. And the mycorrhizae connect the roots of this plant to the beech tree, and somehow or another this acts as a sink to tell the beech tree to redirect some of its nutrients to it for its livelihood. So this is an interesting example of a parasitic plant. Actually, it's called an epiparasite because it has an intermediate fungal attachment. So what else about Indian pipe? One thing that I've been interested in hairy anthers on plants, and it turns out that if you look at the anthers on this plant, it has hairs, and I think we don't really understand why anthers have hairs, but it's an interesting thing on some plants.
I've been asked to read my artist statement so that you can have a sense of what it is that motivates me to create these images. I have always loved trees. As a child, I loved them naively. They were big and beautiful. They were fun to climb. looking for the perfect spot to settle down and read a good book. They provided a cool and shaded spot during hot summer days. I gave them no thought. They were. As I grew older, I loved them intellectually. I began to learn interesting facts about them in biology and natural science classes. They appeared in great literature. I saw their miraculous beauty and complexity depicted in masterpieces of art. Still, I gave them little thought. They were. As an adult, I have grown to love them passionately. They have provided me with solace and comfort during times of pain and loss. They speak to me of eternal truths on my walks through the woods. I lose my sense of self when I get lost looking up at the play of their leaves. When I began to study photography, I found myself photographing trees obsessively. They are my favorite subject. I always see something new when I photograph a tree. They don't move all that much. They are constantly changing and eternally beautiful. I pay great attention to trees these days. I give them lots of thought. They are. It is my hope that this exhibition will excite the same love of trees in you, that you will think of them often, look at them closely, and be thankful for all they give us and our planet.